and welcome to today's weekly webinar for LEAP training and coaching. I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk all about 3 simple steps to setting up effective feedback. We're going to have a great session here today. I want to start out with one simple thing. I'm going to keep everyone on mute who's on the webinar live, and I will look to answer any questions that you put in the chat box probably towards the end of the video here today. So we're going to be here for about 15 to 20 minutes, and I just want to share that we're really going to go through and make sure that you not only understand the content of why is it important to set up feedback effectively, but also here are some techniques and tips to it. So stay tuned for that. Now, as I said, today's LEAP weekly webinar is all about that idea of how do we set up effective feedback. And the reason is that we hear all too often that it's all in the delivery of feedback. It's all in how you deliver it. But that's not 100% true. There's actually 2 factors to it, and that's why next week's is all about delivering effective feedback, which is oftentimes what we learn about. But actually setting up effective feedback can be just as powerful as the delivery method. Or even if we deliver it great, if we don't set it up effectively, we can actually hinder the progress, create some defensiveness, and we learned all about that. So yes, delivery is important, but so is setting it up. So I want to give you a little starting concept story to consider. So imagine that it's a Friday afternoon. You get that little Bing email from your boss that says, hey, meet me in my office 8 a.m. on Monday. What do you usually do? You usually spend the entire weekend just constantly just thinking about, okay, what do you think it is? Do you think they knew that I messed up on that project and was an hour late on the deadline? Do you think that one of my team members complained about me? Do you think, and you go on and on and on, and you try to figure out every single thing that could have gone wrong before. Now, this is important to understand because what happens is when we either deliver or receive feedback, we really do live in that state of fear and defensiveness, which we learned about in the last webinar. So if you haven't seen that, I would highly consider you pause right where we are, go back and watch the last webinar, which was all about how we're hardwired for this, and fast forward into this once you're done. And so, you know, when you spend the whole weekend worrying, fretting about this, when you show up to either be the one to deliver or receive the feedback, what do you think your body is like? Your mind is like? We're tense, we're stressed, we feel a little sick to our stomach and things like that. Well, yes, that's completely normal. We talked about that. But that hinders what's going to happen in the conversation. If we come in from a point of being a little defensive, a little scared, a little anxious about some feedback, whether we're delivering it or receiving it, it's going to create some disjointedness, some dysfunction in our communication. And that's what setting up effective feedback is going to all be about. It's about the system of setting it up for success. So when you get that boss's email that says, hey, need to be in my office tomorrow at 8 a.m., that you understand that when you approach the conversation, how do you set it up? If you're the manager asking somebody, how do you set it up to be the most successful feedback that you can either receive or give? Now, I always try to bring some sort of statistics in, and some of these are repeated from other ones, but I think it's just important to understand where some of the statistics say we lie in this. And so it talks about that 75% of respondents to a survey said that they really see feedback as valuable. And this is important to know because what we're talking about is setting up effective feedback. And so there is always feedback, but how do we set it up so it's effective and therefore valuable for the people receiving it and giving it? Another one I oftentimes quote, and I think is really important, is that in this survey, 92% of respondents actually said that they think that negative feedback can have a really good effect if it is done correctly. And part of that is setting this system up in this webinar and then in the next, learning to deliver it. And so those are just some of the easy ones that I wanted to share, but we really do have a fear. We have a fear of feedback. And that's why when approaching feedback, we need to come at it in a certain way. And so this system of setting up effective feedback is really our opportunity to what we call open up the space, right? Open the space to being open to the possibilities, right? To being having that mindset that, hey, I'm here to learn something, I'm here to receive something, right? It actually helps us give us the opportunity to set some expectations, to quell those hardwired abilities we learned about in the last webinar. Really, it helps us quell those. Go, hey, shh, I know that feedback is scary. Let's put that aside today, and let's really be present in this conversation with our supervisor or the person we're giving feedback to. Let's learn to quell those. So in this webinar here, what we're really going to explore is, it says the chemistry that is produced when properly setting up the space, and 3 methods for opening the space. So I want to start very simply. The chemistry. So last time we talked all about our hardwired systems. As I said, go back and watch that. It's really interesting how it talks about our amygdala, the way that it takes over our brain and says, let's protect ourselves. Let's get in defensiveness. Let's fight, right? And that's what will happen in feedback. But what's really neat is when you set up effective feedback, when you set it up in a systematic way using science and using new interpersonal skills and conversational dynamic skills that we're going to work on here today, as well as in all of these webinars and all of our trainings and coachings and things we work on with people, you actually make a shift. That shift is that beautiful shift from, here's my survival brain, but I give myself the space and time to move up into that prefrontal cortex where I can actually create relationship, where I can actually communicate, problem solve, be creative, and really work together to appreciate and collaborate with others. It's just a beautiful spot in our brain that research has shown that's where you want to be to have really good, productive, strong conversations. And you can see that, by the way, in the way that we set up any type of learning. The whole learning is designed, how do we get people right up here? Prefrontal cortex, they're looking at things in a great way. What's neat about it is when we are able to make that shift, which these techniques have been proven to help you take the time your brain needs, make the self-awareness, really self-management tip of let's move myself, let's move other people into this prefrontal cortex, it actually produces these neurotransmitters that flood through our brain. Okay, they flood through us. What's neat is a neurotransmitter, actually, our brain is like this, all of our little neurons, and there's a little gap. Okay, they're all like that. It's kind of hard to see on the camera. And they all have that little gap. Well, these neurotransmitters fill that gap and allow us to think and process quicker. And that's why when we are flooded with this, we're able to make connections, think, problem solve, do those things, make those higher levels. And it really brings us a more sense of relaxation, more syncness, connection with somebody. And so it's really valuable. Make the shift, survival up to our executive prefrontal cortex, and we're going to have such a more productive feedback session when we do that. And so what I want to share now is our 3 steps for what are some techniques, some tips, some things you can take away right now to implement so that when you're either delivering or receiving feedback, that we can be the most effective that we can. So I'm going to make sure I address it in both ways. Now, technique, tip, strategy number 1 is actually called prime ourselves. And this is a technique and topic we talk a lot about because it's very, very valuable and important. And so imagine priming like you open a brand new soap bottle. Okay, you open your brand new soap bottle, spin it, and then you put your hand under and you tap down and nothing happens. You're like, okay, that's weird. You tap a few times and eventually the soap comes out. Well, what priming is it's priming that. That's why they used to call it prime the pump, right? We're priming the soap bottle so that the soap will come out. And yes, there is stuff coming out. It's actually air, right? Well, for ourselves, if we jump into a conversation that's going to be a little tough, the thing that we're trying to get out of the way is all that survival, all that, oh my gosh, do I need to protect myself? Can I trust this person? We're letting that go. We're saying, hey, get that out first, and then we'll get in the right part of our brain. We'll prime ourselves, right, to be successful. And so priming ourselves is about putting ourselves in the mindset where we're in this prefrontal cortex. So whether you're giving or receiving feedback, it's about a really, really conscious mind shift that we make. So we suggest for people maybe some questions. They just sit down, reflect on themselves, whether that be before or just right before the session. that they're going to meet with somebody, just really sit down and say, okay, what kind of mindset do I need to be in to deliver feedback in an effective way? What kind of mindset do I need to be in to receive feedback? Maybe it's, you know what, when I receive feedback, I need to come at it and really just listen for learnings in what they say. I really just have to come from the mindset of, I'm here to learn what I can do better. Because when we just make the shift of, I'm here to learn what I can do better, when somebody gives you that feedback that's, okay, this didn't go very well and we need you to do it more like this, what we're doing is our brain is processing it in the mindset, in the perspective, the lens of, I'm trying to learn what they're saying. Versus they tell us that in our protect mode, our survival mode is going to say, hey, they're questioning you and your intelligence, push back, right? Or flee or get frustrated, whatever it is. And so we can actually change things by just our perspective. So it's as simple as a mind shift where we consciously choose the mindset and the perspective we're going to have walking into feedback. Maybe if I'm delivering feedback, it could be, okay, how do I really want this person to feel after the conversation? I want you to sit in your chair and just imagine, what do you want them to feel and to notice about themselves when they're walking away? And if you say, I want them to have learned something, consciously what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for, well, in order to help someone learn something, I need to make sure that I remain calm and do not get frustrated with them if they push back or something. And what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for the same lens that you're seeing the world through. That is, I'm trying to help someone learn. So how's the best way to teach somebody? And so you kind of shift your mindset and allow them to open themselves up. So priming ourselves is all about a mindset shift where we're actually consciously thinking about, how do we want to be? How do we want to show up? Okay. The second one here is called inviting someone to the conversation. It's another step of setting up effective feedback. And as my example was earlier, when you get the email that says, be in my office at 8 a.m. the next morning, that's a tough email to receive, because we sit there the rest of the day, night, weekend, and worry. What does that mean? What are they upset about? And so, yes, there'll be cases where you have to immediately invite someone to the conversation. You might have to approach them or be approached by someone, and you may need to push it off for a later time. You may have to shoot an email, whatever it is. But what I want you to think about when you're inviting someone to the conversation is, what can I do to make them shift into their prefrontal cortex? That's important. I want you to think about, how do I make that shift? And the reason it's important is because when we take the conscious time to say, okay, what would make them see this email from their prefrontal cortex? Be in my office at 8 would go, okay, I need to add a little more, because I know that creates defensiveness. So it might be, hey, can I see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock? I'm excited to look over this project. I want your update. I have a couple things of feedback for you. No worries. We'll see you soon. Something like that. That was a poorly written email, obviously, as I'm saying it out loud. But the point is what I'm doing is I'm really thinking through, how am I saying that? And our best example of this is we had a client who was taking over for someone else's responsibility for the day while they were sick, and the computer system went down, and they went, I have no idea how to fix this. And so they texted someone that they thought, okay, this person will know. And they said, need to see you in blank's office now. Now, when that person got up there, the individual who sent the message said, wow, I realized right away their face, their body looked scared. And I realized immediately, I sent them a message. I said, get in his office now. And I forgot to add the part, the computer system went down and I really need your help. Okay? And so just that little bit of information. So no matter if you're emailing, you're immediately asking somebody, you're any way of inviting them to a feedback session. Make sure you think about, what can I do? What kind of words, actions, text can I provide that would help them shift from their primitive survival brain into their prefrontal cortex so they can hear this information the way they need to. And that's a big, powerful thing. And it does take just a couple extra seconds, couple extra minutes to prepare the email, the conversation, but really take that time because it helps open people up to possibilities. Now, the third technique to talk about is the physical space of the conversation. And this one is very simple. I just want you to think about, how am I setting up the space I'm in? Too often when we try to give feedback, if we're giving feedback, we may sit in our supervisor's office, They got a big brown desk in front of them. They're sitting up in a chair a little higher. We sit in that little chair and we look up at them. And the power dynamic that creates is extremely important to understand what it does to our brain. And so with the physical layout, I want you to think about, is there a way to sit right next to somebody? In a way of, I'm not positionally powered, I'm sitting next to you. And the best example I've ever heard is from Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And it talked about that their CEO had one important thing. When he was going to meet with somebody that was not at his level, and this was his way of doing it, but I want you to think about it. He would take off his tie, undo his tie, push it down a little bit, and he had this little table in the corner of his office where he would go and sit, and he'd be able to sit right next to the individual that he was talking to. And what he was doing was symbolizing a level of, I'm sitting here with you in this process so that you understand that we're in this together. Even if there's tough, hard, negative feedback that needs to be provided, I am here with you in this process. And that provides a lot of value. So think about your physical space. Am I sitting on ends of tables? Am I behind a desk? Am I higher, lower? And just think about, how do I create a I'm with you feel to this conversation, to this feedback, and not that I'm delivering it at you. So as you look at setting up effective feedback, what I'm really telling you more than anything is it's all about mindfulness. It's about consciousness, about, hey, I've now heard from Ryan that, hey, it's hardwired that we are going to be in fear and defensiveness, that I'm going to be in fear and defensiveness. So I must make a conscious effort to shift away. If I'm receiving feedback, I need to make the shift. I need to come in with an open mind, with an open heart to receive what I need to receive. If I'm delivering feedback, how do I both keep myself in a way of having effective feedback, but also provide the atmosphere and the energy and the environment that individual needs to have effective feedback? So it really is valuable, it is important, and I really want you to think about, what are we doing to set up effective feedback? Yes, delivery is important, but step one is effective feedback. So think about it, jot your ideas, your reflection, and come back next week where we're really going to talk about how to deliver effective feedback in a way that provides ease. It allows the other person to keep those shifts, to navigate conversations that can go all over. Is going to be a great session. So I'll see you next week. Otherwise, keep practicing. How do I set up effective feedback? Thank you.